What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? It's your boy Matty P here with another War Room episode as we head into the draft. This is our day 2 top 75 picks available on day 2 that I think fit the Steelers. And I'm really excited to bring this content to you. As you know, for the regular listeners of this show and regular watchers of this show on YouTube, and for those that don't, that are new, obviously we'd like you to hit that subscribe button, like the show, hit the bell icon. But the War Room series is focused about putting you in the minds of Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin, and the rest of the Steelers front office as they look to put together a winning roster. And that's exactly what's going to happen on the draft on Thursday night in the US live. Obviously, then that's round 1. Then we have day 2 on Friday, day 3 on Saturday. All those things happen the following day for me over on the other side of the world. So today's show, wanted to talk to you about those, as I said, those players from that top 75 that I've got that should be available on day 2. Now, there's a little bit of overlap you'll see in this between 2 players from day 1. We had 6 unique, if you like, prospects there, 8 prospects overall, 4 on offense, 4 on defense. If you didn't catch that show, you can go back and watch that after this one. We'll try and keep this show to about half an hour. And if you also missed the show that I did that's gone live earlier today, that I did with Marky D, my co-host of the Touchdown Under boys and the Touchdown Under Mad Monday shows. We did a podcast earlier today that's gone live and earlier today in terms of when I recorded this. And we talked about how Omar Khan and the Steelers front office might be approaching the draft from a position perspective. Less about prospects, more about position. So you can go check that out too. It's about a 25-minute show. But pretty interesting what we talked about there. And we talked about the press conference that's happened in the last 24 to 48 hours. And we also talked about the press conference that Omar Khan, an interview that he did at the Combine, and the parallels and the synergies between those two discussions, if you like. So with that in mind, as I said, we're going to get into these day 2 top 75. And as always, I like to give you something visual. Let's use the visual medium on YouTube. If you're listening on the audio side, don't worry, I'll talk you through the visuals. So top 75, day 2, we're going to see, off the top of my head, about 34 to 36 prospects as I put this together for day 2. Now, you might say, wow, that's a lot, but the Steelers have 3 picks currently, and you never know. They may get more if they trade back from 17, or they may trade, back from 32. They get multiple picks on day 2, and it kind of also depends on what happens and where they go in round 1 at pick 17. You'll see it's strategically defense heavy. Now, why is it strategically defense heavy? It's strategically defense heavy because the Steelers have invested a lot of draft capital over the last few years on the offense, and particularly in the early rounds. As that offense starts to get more expensive, as Kenny Pickett potentially, over the next 4 or 5 years comes off that rookie deal, as they lose some of that talent, Cam Hayward's not going to be around forever. Minka will have for 5 years, but then, he'll probably be up, not necessarily retiring, but he'll be up for another contract. TJ Watt will be up for another contract as well. There's other guys moving on, like, Ogunjobi's not going to be with the Steelers for 5 years. And who knows what Leal will turn out to be. Just that gives, and obviously all the other guys they've signed in the interior defensive line might only be here for 1 to 2 years, regardless of what their deal says. So strategically defense heavy to get younger and cheaper at key positions. I said it earlier in my intro, but overflow from round 1. There are 2 players that you will see that if you've listened to or watched the round 1 show, you'll now see 2 players because they're more likely to be drafted early in the second. But one of them definitely, you probably need to pick him at 32 and not trade back. The other one, you might be able to make it back to 40, but I doubt he'll go past there. On the defensive side, you will see something, what I call tacklers over tricksters. You're going to see a lot of guys in the trenches. In round 1, on the show we did there, we talked about getting trenchy, not trendy. Well, it's tacklers over tricksters, to use some more words starting with the letter T. I've also factored in more picks in the scenario that the Steelers trade back. Now, I think that's important because particularly if the Steelers trade up in round 1 using 17 and 49, they may then choose to trade back from 32 to then get multiple picks in the second round again. So, or second round and third round, for example. So right now they pick 32 on day 2, 49 and 80. That I kind of think that's a bit subject to change. So let's see. And then secondly, one of the other things that you'll note is it reflects the guys I've put in this list that I like, that I think are good fits, that I would be comfortable with them drafting, reflect the Steelers' views on draft depth and talent. So if you go back to Omar Khan's comments in the combine, and then he pretty much replicated them exactly the same thing in his pre-draft press conference, he talked about O-line, D-line, linebacker, cornerback. That's very reflected in this. So let's jump straight into it. All right. Offense. So I want to start with the offense. So we've got 14 players. Now I've broken this up into offensive line guys and then skill positions, for want of a better word. I'm going to talk through them quickly. I'm not going to bombard you with stats. I'm just going to talk about where I think these guys will go, what they mean. You can go have a look at them. There's a couple of guys I'd like to get some profile videos out, but we're starting to run out of time as we get to Thursday evening for the NFL draft. And Mark and I will be doing a live watch party. More details to come. Stay tuned. If you subscribe, you'll get the community post that'll tell you how you can watch that. There'll also be reaction videos, and there'll be some update videos through the draft in terms of how things are progressing and how early picks have affected potentially who the Steelers might be able to get at 17. All right, so Steve Avila, if you caught my show on the day one picks, he's there as well. He probably finds himself early day two. One of my favorite picks in this draft process. If you've listened to me at all over particularly those listeners out there and viewers on YouTube that have watched us back to our Steel Curtain days, I've been talking about this guy for a year. Almost a year. So really keen on Steve Avila, 6'5", 337 pounds, also 334 pounds. Can play anywhere on the interior, including center, more likely to be a guard. Really could be that left guard potential with Dotson in his final year. And then also, I know they drafted, they got Ciamalo in the offseason in free agency, but even with James Daniels, this guy comes in. You don't have to start him year one. You can start him year one if you want, and it gives you continuity in the O-line, particularly if they don't get a tackle in round one. I then have got Cody Mock, particularly if they keep the 49th pick, purely because he can play anywhere on the O-line. If they don't go O-line in round one and they wait till 49, he could be the guy there. He went into the Senior Bowl at offensive tackle from North Dakota State University. He is more likely to play on the interior. They tried him at all 5 positions, so versatile player. Bit Matt Filer-like in some ways. Missing one of his front teeth or 2 front teeth there. He said he's going to get that fixed in the NFL, and now when he gets to the NFL, now he's thinking he might not get it fixed. I think that's quite cool. Then you got Osiris Torrance. So he's probably the guy that's going to be drafted. And I've talked about hearing, I've ranked them in terms of who I'd like. I do like Osiris Torrance, but I'd pick Avila over Osiris Torrance, and I like Cody Mock's versatility over what Osiris Torrance brings. But Osiris Torrance is from Florida State or Florida. I think it's Florida, yeah. And then he plays on the interior line. He's 6'5", 337 pounds because Avila's 334 pounds. Big block, young, so does need to develop a little bit, but could turn into, he's got a huge upside compared to some of the other guys on this list. Then you got John Michael Schmitz. He could fall back into the early of the 3rd round. The other guys are probably definitely second rounders, I think. John Michael Schmitz is probably one of the best pure centers in this draft. I don't love picking that. I think you can go with someone else that's versatile, particularly with the fact that most O-lines don't get through 17 games like what the Steelers O-line did last year. So he's a safe pick. I don't love it at 7, certainly not 17. I don't love it 32. I do think 49 might be a bit high. Now, he'll probably get drafted higher than 49. Some team will want that center. I don't think the Steelers have that need at center to go and grab him there. Then you got Jalen Duncan, the tackle out of Maryland. He was someone that got a bit of draft hype through the process in sort of Feb, March, probably in the 2nd round, probably I wouldn't call late, mid-2nd rounder. Again, this is more if they've missed out on Darnell Wright or Broderick Jones in the 1st, or they choose not to go there for whatever reason. You have Joe Tippmann, who's probably a center prospect out of Wisconsin. There's rumors he might fall into the back of the 3rd, a bit like not Cole Strange, he was drafted in the 2nd. It was Cam Jurgens was the 2nd. Yeah, Cole Strange, who fell to the Patriots last year, a bit like that. Then you got Matthew Bergeron, a tackle as well. I'm not the biggest Matthew Bergeron fan. I do think some of he's had a lot of hype in the draft process. I don't love it, but if he's sitting there in the third and they don't have a tackle, I don't mind it. But I kind of think if you're not going to get a tackle early, why are you going after tackle in this draft? The depth, well, certainly on day one and day two. I think if you don't go day one and you're not going to go at 32 because someone's fallen, or you're not going to trade back in to get one for whatever reason if they're falling, I don't know why you're waiting to get your depth piece with Bergeron, particularly if you can get Jalen Duncan before him. So I have a third round grade on Matthew Bergeron right now. On the skill position side, Darnell Washington, a guy that we probably, if we're going to pick him, it's at 32 or, under 40, depending on what we do with trades and picks. Luke Musgrave's another tight end. He is a more of that receiving tight end. I've got him up there purely because I think paired with Pat Freiermuth, it could be the lethal. But I like the fit of Darnell Washington in a Matt Canada offense and any other future offensive coordinator if Matt Canada can't get the job done. So like Darnell Washington there, Luke Musgrave's got to be there because he is a top talent. And then I really like Davis Allen out of Clemson. Some people have him as late as the 6th round. I think he's a guy that's going to go in the first 3 rounds. I think he's probably the 5th, the 6th tight end, in terms of quality, because obviously ahead of Darnell Washington, you've got Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid. Just trying to think of some of the other guys that are in this mix. But Davis Allen, I really like what he can do. I feel like he's a bit of a poor man's Dalton Kincaid, and that's no slight. Dalton Kincaid is like number 9 on DJ's top 150 right now, number 9, number 6. Davis Allen, and he was at Clemson. And that's the other thing when we talk about Brian Breesy on the day one show. The Steelers had a big presence at Clemson and spent a lot of time at Clemson, talked to a lot of guys. That doesn't always mean they're drafting the top guy. Think about the time they spent at Georgia last year, and then they ended up getting George Pickens. So I do like that. Now, the next guy is Zay Flowers, who could, from skill position, I think, now I've ranked the tight ends here in order. Also, I have the wide receivers. Zay Flowers is probably the best guy outside of round 1. He may even scrape into the back of round 1. I love his play. He's a bit more of that nimble, fast guy. I think he's 177 pounds. He might be 5'9" or 5'11". Super fast wide receiver, but with some packs and punch. A bit like I would say slightly bigger or more aggressive Jamar Chase. So I like Zay Flowers. I think he's got some pizzazz to him. A lot of people are comparing him to Antonio Brown in terms of the way he comes out, and he's got that X factor about him. Not off the field, which is the good thing. Then Marvin Mims, someone that gets, depending on who you talk to, apparently, according to Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah, DJ, depending on who you talk to, some front officers love him, some front officers don't. Very much a possession, speed guy, route guy, one of the better route runners in the draft. Look, I think he's better than Tyler Scott, but Tyler Scott's probably going to go ahead of him. Tyler Scott's from Cincinnati. And then I've got Roschon Johnson from Texas. Now, he backed up Bijan Robinson, which is why he's kind of gone under the radar. But he's probably a day 2 pick for most teams. He could be argued as maybe the 3rd or 4th best running back in this draft. I know the Steelers are very unlikely to pick a guy like that, but if he falls, and you think about the Matt Canada offense, and depending what other moves they've made, it wouldn't be the craziest pick in the draft. I also like him because he's a bit bigger than Jaylen Warren, bigger body in terms of height and weight, and has that punch at the line of scrimmage. So offers something a bit different. And I think you get him plus Warren, you've got a really nice rushing attack, and you've got it there. I guess my factoring in, not just the fact he's a Texas Longhorns and Texas Longhorn, I love the way he plays, and Texas Longhorns represent. I like Roschon Johnson because in this Steelers team, because Najee's going into his 3rd year. Najee was banged up last year, and when Najee was banged up, this offense didn't fire. We've got to fire, and you look at teams in our division and what they've been able to do with dual running backs. The same thing for many other teams in the AFC. It is a helpful element, and it takes the pressure off Kenny Pickett, particularly if they are going to beef up the O-line. We may as well go in there. I do like it, particularly because if they trade back in the draft and they start getting multiple picks, I do like the idea of Roschon Johnson. Not someone that's going to be on everyone's on Steelers' radar, but he's the only running back I've got on day 2 and one of very few running backs I've got in my top 75 fits for the Steelers. But I do think he'd be really good behind the Steelers line. And he's not that bad at receiving the ball either. So, exciting from Roschon Johnson. So that's the offense. That's 14 players. We'll now move on to the defense. Love to hear your thoughts in the live chat. Oh, the live chat, this is recording, but in the comments as well. You might hate what I've done. Cool. You might love what I've done. Want to hear both sides of the coin. Some of these names may be new to you. It's probably not going to be after draft day. But who knows? Maybe the Steelers pick one of these 14 guys on the offensive side of the football. All right, moving on to number 3. The way we're talking through positions across day 1 and day 2, but it's the day 2, the defensive picks, 22 players. Now, I've ordered these in cornerback, and these are ranked in who I like in terms of talent. And there's going to be some surprises there, and I'll talk through why I've said that. And then I put the other guys, more the trench guys, in yellow. So they're the linebackers, the interior defensive linemen, the edge rushers, and then the more general linebackers as well. So we'll go through cornerbacks first. Cornerbacks. Emmanuel Forbes probably is a first rounder. He's about 6'1", 171 pounds, very light guy, but an all-round cornerback. And if he weighed 10 to 15 pounds more, he'd probably been ahead of Joey Porter and in a conversation with Deontay Banks as the third best cornerback in this draft. I then have Joey Porter Jr. Yes, I didn't have him in my round 1. I do have him in my round 2. I know he'll probably go in round 1. Some of that comes down to pedigree. He is good in press. He is good in man. And Steelers are playing a lot more man than they used to under Terrell Austin. In fact, they were sort of like a top 5, I think, team in the league last year, according to some PFF stats that go up to about week 12 at 46% of their defensive snaps played in man. However, Joey Porter Jr. is not great in zone, and he deliberately avoided some of the drills in the draft process related to zone stuff. And that's a problem for me when he has got a little bit lower production and he's had a lot of penalties. I don't think he's worth top 20 pick. I also I'm okay with it at 32. But I mean, I think in terms of what players can produce, I don't know why you would go that high when you've got some of these other guys like Keely Ringo, who's 6'2", over 200 pounds, run fast. You've got Jalen Jones again, 6'2", 205 pounds, out of Texas A&M. Keely Ringo played for Georgia, of course. So why go that high with Porter when you can go get some of these other guys? And that's kind of reflective. When you look at Omar Khan's comments, he said O-line, D-line, linebacker, then cornerback. Cornerback is probably one of the deepest, if not the deepest, position group in this draft, probably aligned with tight end. So I've got then Garrett Williams out of Syracuse. I really like him. I think he can do a lot with the football. I think he's pretty versatile in terms of defending the football, because he's a defender when I say doing a lot with the football. I have him over Tyreek Stevenson. I know the Steelers like Tyreek Stevenson. I know he came in for the visit. He's about 6'2", I think about 200 to 202 pounds out of Miami. Look, if they go him 32, totally get it. I don't know why they do that if a guy like Keely Ringo is still on the board. I do think Jalen Jones offers the same thing as both of those guys, but at the back end of round 3. Don't know why you wouldn't do it there. Garrett Williams is a bit of a different type of cornerback, less of that big body, although I think he's 6'1" or 6 foot and 190 pounds. More of that fast guy, coverage guy. Like him, I think he's more versatile than people give him credit for, and I think he'll develop into a good pro. That's why I have him high. Then you got the slot guy in Travius Hodges-Tomlinson. He could still be there at pick 120 in the 4th round, but he probably gets picked before the end of the 3rd, particularly because that's when you start to see some compensatory picks as well. I then got Catrell Clark, cornerback. I think he's 6'2" and about 195 pounds off the top of my head. Again, a bit more of a tackling cornerback. I kind of like him early day 3, but I had him in the back end of day 2 if these guys have rocketed off the board, because there's been a run on cornerbacks, particularly if Joe Porter, Emmanuel Forbes, Deontay Banks, Christian Gonzalez, and Devin Witherspoon, 5 cornerbacks go in round 1. And that is a possibility when you look at which teams need a cornerback and how high Devin Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez are likely to be drafted. Then get into Riley Moss, now out of Iowa. Now, he's someone that some people thought would be a 4 to 6 round pick. Apparently, the league really likes him. Bigger cornerback, safety kind of sort of player. So that's why I've listed him as DB. I really don't like when players that are clearly cornerbacks or clearly safeties are listed as DB. But when there are those players that can play in that safety that are a bigger cornerback, I don't mind the defensive back designation. So he could be there. I like him. I do think he's a good tackler. He got a lot of, and I'll just be clear on it, like he got a lot of discussion with people trying not to say it, but like he was one of the few white cornerbacks you'll see. That quick guy, really good playmaker. Interested to see there. Look, if they're in the third and the Steelers haven't gone cornerback, I don't mind it because of that versatility. But I kind of think he'll go to a different team than the Steelers. I then got Sidney Brown at safety. Now, it was very hard for me not to include JL Skinner in the day 2 picks, but because of his, I think it's a back injury, but he's had an injury through the draft process. I think he'll fall to early round 4. He's like 211 pounds, 6'4", really fast guy. So I'm saying Sidney Brown out of Illinois. He probably goes top 50 picks. Now, that might be a bit early for most people for safety. I'm not convinced that Keanu Neal is the future for the Steelers there more than 1 year. Maybe the Steelers can wait another year for safety. I do really want to see this upgraded. I think in a defensively passionate team, I'll call it that, like the Steelers, I think you need safeties, and particularly AFC, to mark up against tight ends like Travis Kelce, Dawson Knox, Uzama, who plays for the Jets, Mark Andrews, Hayden Hurst, who's the tight end down at, I think it's Gesicki, the tight end down in Miami. I think he even got franchise tag. Like, you've got guys like that you need to be able to, cover. And I don't love, don't love is probably the right phrase, what the Steelers have got there to protect against those pass-catching tight end and those big receiving, big playmaking tight ends. So that's the cornerback side of the room now, and I've done that deliberately because I think the Steelers are going to tackle in round 1, so I wanted to provide lots of cornerback options in round 2, even if 2 of those guys are off the board. I think off the top of my head, there's 10 cornerbacks listed right now on this slide. So then we go to the trenches. Remember I said trenchy, not trendy on day 1, and I said tacklers, not tricksters on day 2. So now you've got Jack Campbell at linebacker. I think love it at 32. Do it. Lock it in. 6'5", 242 to 245 pounds. Train with Luke Kuechly. Can even be shifted outside if you had to and you needed to in some sets. Like it. Bring it in. Run the card up. Here we go. Steelers, here we go. Then we got Keanu Benton, interior defensive lineman, who they spoke to a lot, and he talked about this at the Senior Bowl. He's probably the 4th best interior defensive lineman behind Jalen Carter, Brian Breesy, then Mazai Smith. Mazai Smith is on this list as well. I do think he falls within the first 2 rounds. I don't think he's going to scrape into the first like Mazai Smith has a chance to, but he is there if they choose to go to interior defensive lineman at like 49. And then I've got Dayan Henley, more of a coverage linebacker. Put him in there because they do have the big tackler run stuffers. When you look at Cole Holcomb, Landon Roberts, Mark Robinson, but he's that guy that gives you that coverage, that versatility out of Washington State. I think 49, fair enough if there's been a run on linebackers. If you could get him at 80, you'd be cheering. I don't think he's going to be there at 80, though. That's the problem you've got. Then I've got Demarion Overshawn, again, another Texas Longhorn here, wrapping those guys. Big guy. He's about 220-ish pounds to 225 pounds. Can put much more weight on that frame. He's about 6'4", so very tall guy, very rangy guy, very fast. He's played all over the place. You can play him at a strong safety position in packages. Again, he could be a really nice way if you're not going to go get a safety on day 2. He could be, or even in the draft, he could be a really good guy that gives you a little bit of versatility, a bit of an unknown for offenses there to scheme against, but gives you something, a bit of an X factor on defense. And the play different things is going to be a good special teamer. Steelers do like that out of players, that versatility. Then I have Will McDonald the 4th if the Steelers choose to prioritize edge along with KJ Henry. Will McDonald's probably, some people have him as late as the 4th, some people have him in the 2nd. Some people at one point were saying he'll scrape him the 1st. He was considered the hardest guy to mark up against from a pass rush perspective at the Senior Bowl when it came to edge rushes. It's going to be interesting to see really what happens with him. But I do think if the Steelers are going to go early on our outside linebacker, I think it's going to be that. I think it's going to be a guy like Will McDonald. Probably you need to pick him by 49. I don't think he'll last much longer after that. That's assuming he makes it to 49. You then got KJ Henry, who is also out of Clemson off the top of my head. Again, a guy, nice edge rusher in a 3-4. Can do a lot in the 3-4. Not necessarily. I don't think he had the production that Will McDonald had in this previous year, but I think he had more production the year before. Again, that's like it's been a while since I did deep diving into KJ Henry's stats. But he's like a 6'3" to 6'5" guy, 252 pounds off the top of my head. You have to check that. But yeah, another guy that, absolute edge rusher pressure. I see him more as a day 3 guy, not a day 3 guy. I see him as a day 2 guy, but a 3rd round guy, not a 2nd round pick. So he's more of an 80th. He'd be consideration at pick 80. Then you got Jared Clark out of Coastal Carolina. I hope I've got that right. I mixed his college up with Jervin Dexter Sr. down the bottom. But Jared Clark, I've always liked him. He's a 3rd round guy for me, 80. He might even slip to early day 3. Won't hate it if they pick him. Run stuffer. I don't think he's a massive upgrade, so I don't really want to see him before pick 80 if he's going to be selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers. We then have Mazai Smith, interior defensive lineman out of Michigan on Bruce Feltman's Athletics Freaks list, number 1. I do think he goes very early. Like if you're not picking him at 32, you're probably not going to get to pick him unless there's a trade back for whatever reason. So, Mazai Smith will be interesting, and that'll tell you a lot. If they go get him, he's that sort of starter that can, he will be a long-term Steeler, I think, if he makes his way into the Pittsburgh Steelers. You then have Drew Sanders, who for a long time was considered the best linebacker, had a slight chance from some pundits of scraping the back end of the first. He and Jack Campbell have kind of battled it out. Drew Sanders seems to be sort of being slotted in by a lot of teams that want a 4-3 as the linebacking guy. He played right outside linebacker, I think it was, for some teams, or outside linebacker. He switched from Alabama into Arkansas. He wasn't getting snaps. Got like 9 sacks last year. I think he had about 100 tackles. Had a great season. I think I like the body of Jack Campbell better, and I like the fact I love the fact he's been training with Luke Kuechly, one of my favorite linebackers of all time. But even though he played in a 4-3, Luke Kuechly, but Drew Sanders probably a bit more ready to make an impact week 1, but by mid-season, Jack Campbell would be fine, if not earlier. So I think the gap's narrowed on them. There was a bit more of a gap where you were kind of early in the draft process, you were kind of happy with Drew Sanders at 32, Jack Campbell at 49, but probably not earlier if you're a Steeler fan. Now, happy with Jack Campbell at 32. Now, Jervin Dexter Sr., I think he's Florida State. Inferior defensive lineman, big guy. You can see I don't have Siaki Ika. I don't have him because there's a few guys here that I'm talking about in round 3, like Jervin Dexter, Jared Clark. I think Siaki Ika will go in round 2. I don't have a round 2 grade on him for where the Steelers are picking at 32 and 49. That's just me. I know he's a massive guy. I think he's 6'6" or 6'5" and 341 pounds, but I thought he was too slow at the combine. Now, you might say to me, it doesn't matter. He's only got to go 10 yards in the position he plays. I just didn't love it. I just didn't. That's just how I feel about it. Then you got Kalijah Cansey. Now, he probably will be taken within round 1 or early on day 2. If he's there at 32, maybe the Steelers go there. But I think they'll have other needs. Particularly, I think there'll be other players that fall. And I don't think he'll be there. But if he somehow fell, and if they traded back and had multiple, and if they acquired an extra day 2 pick, even if it's just trading back from 32, I wouldn't hate it, put it that way. And then you've got I've done typo there because I swapped it from all caps to lowercase but capitalizing the first letter. You've got Felix Anudike Uzoma. I knew I'm going to butcher that name. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. I do like him as a edge rusher there. I know that a lot of people are mocking the fits and the fits to the Steelers with him. I do like Will McDonald and KJ Henry more. I've been mocking KJ Henry for a lot longer. But I wouldn't be surprised with the Felix pick. I think he's 6'2" and 242 pounds, has some sack production. I think he had between 7 and 9 sacks absolutely off the top of my head. I've looked at a lot of stats. It's very late in the evening for me as I record this live. But I wouldn't mind him in the 3rd. I think he'll be gone before 80. And I don't see it at 49. I think the Steelers are going elsewhere, linebacker, corner, after they've gone tackle, or even if they've gone defensive line. So he's there. Don't hate as I said, I don't hate the pick. Do think there's a fit. That's how he made the top 75. So with that, we talked about 22 players on the defense. We talked about 14 players on the offensive side. So we're now through 42 players of my top 75. More to come tomorrow. So that this is going live on your Wednesday in the US. On Thursday, before the draft, we will have coming out in the morning. We will have my day 3 players. So excited to bring that to you. Leave your comments if you've got anything you want to share, your opinions on this. Really excited for the draft process. As I said earlier in the show, we will be doing some live streaming, Mark and I, on one of his other channels. But we will have lots of reaction videos, lots of content, and probably day 3 we'll be doing live on this channel as well, which will be 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning for me. So looking forward to that. You guys are going to see very probably husky Matt deliver you some content there, but we'll be passionate. We'll be excited. It is the NFL draft. I love this stuff. I've already started working out what my plans are for prepping for 2024 draft, as weird as that is to say. And I'll finish on this slide. Steve Avila is one of the guys I've talked about the most. Really excited if he can become a Steelers fan. If you don't know who he is, have a look. He did come in for a visit with the Steelers, which absolutely hyped me up. I've been talking about him for a year. I didn't know whether the Steelers were interested, but I do know he had a good presence at the Senior Bowl. And then the Steelers brought him for the visit. It got me hyped. Come on, Steve Avila, particularly if he drops to 49. But look, all will be revealed on draft day. And as always, go Steelers.